The following broadcast is intended for mature audiences. These are real people sharing very real, deeply personal experiences. This content may be considered triggering for others and for those who are sharing. The chat room is a privilege intended for discussions and sharing. You are not being asked to agree, but you are being asked to stay civil and refrain from personal attacks. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey, Oz, can you go ahead and take over? My microphone's not working right.
We can hear you. Welcome to, you gotta give me the intro.
Oh, now it's working. Okay, holy crap. All right. Welcome back to Am I Mental, a live podcast where real people share stories about how mental health impacts life and life impacts mental health. I'm your host, E. With us tonight is co-host Oz.
What's up, Am I Mental fam?
And we have C. For at least a little while, C started a new job, working graveyards, so we're very fortunate to have him on while we can. Hello, C.
Hello.
So, we had one guest lined up, and as is the nature of a live podcast, that Oz is starting to really understand my frustration. He's walking in my shoes, man. They are not fun. They're filled with brambles and vipers. Our guest canceled just hours before we had to start. Fortunately, I've been in contact with one of my best friends that I've ever had, and I don't know why I ever stopped talking. Life takes you away sometimes, but we have Dave. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what we're talking about tonight.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Dave. I've known Steve for quite a few years, and he's going to be actually a part of this story because he witnessed it.
You witnessed it, man. I was trying to support you through it, too.
Yeah. So
as I was going through my own shit, but that's a different story.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk about HELLP syndrome. And for a lot of you people who may not know what that is, it's a pregnancy disease that literally being pregnant will kill you. Most people are familiar with preeclampsia and eclampsia, which is like hypertension or high blood pressure causes you to get a lot of bed rest and there's swelling. HELLP syndrome is a lot more than that.
It's like the progression of.
Yeah, so it's hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelets. So what that does is your liver will start to swell. It'll encapsulate. Your platelet levels will start to deplete and drop.
So then you start becoming a hemophiliac.
Basically. And that's just all because of the body's fighting the pregnancy. So to take it back a little bit, my wife and I, we were trying to conceive, and we were having a hard time doing it. Fortunately, she was working for an infertility clinic at the time. So she got all of the things that we could do to try to move forward. She had to give herself injections,
which
like daily.
I'm familiar with since my wife and we went through IVF.
Yeah,
I think we went a little bit further than you guys, but yeah.
Yeah, that would have been the next step for us, but this was the one where she had to literally, and it wasn't like, we went through all the processes of checking like my sperm count. Were they good? Was she good? Was there, whose fault or whatever? And we were like, it's always fault, it's just life. But
right. But I mean, it's like, it could be the motility, could be the condition. Like
yeah.
I was saying with my sperm, because I had a vasectomy and then I reversed it, the quality of my sperm was really low. They were exploding as they were trying to harvest them. And my wife's eggs had a ton of debris. So essentially, we were sterile without help.
Rough deal on that.
Sounds like there's an extreme joke somewhere in there. Not a laughing matter, but...
Oh, no. When he said exploding, for some reason, I had some sort of anime pop into my head, and I just couldn't picture which one it was, but yeah.
Yeah, so the procedure they use for me, it's called ICSI. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but basically they take a very, very small pipette and they try to capture the sperm facing the correct direction. So they catch it tail first. So that way the head's loaded at the end of the pipette. Then they stick the pipette into the egg and then inject the single sperm. My sperm were exploding as they were being captured because they were in so poor health.
Well, yeah, another joke in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah. By all means, fire away.
So, yeah, the whole breakdown.
Don't shoot blanks like I was.
So the hemolysis, which is the breakdown of red blood cells, and then there's the elevated liver enzymes, which will cause the swelling and pain, and then the low platelet count. So during the pregnancy, we went through the injections, found out that we were pregnant.
And not just pregnant.
Well, it took a while, it was a couple of weeks. And then I remember the day that she called me from work because she was supposed to have an ultrasound while at work. And she called me to let me know how things were going. And I said, so how's the baby? And she says, oh, they are fine. So, of course, that was her way of telling me, yeah, we're having multiple. And I literally had to sit down. I was like, what? And I was ecstatic. And she was just like, are you worried? I'm like, hell no. And she did say, kind of up front that the doctor did say, if you wanted to, you could terminate one of the pregnancies. And immediately I was like, hell no, we fought for this shit. It's just no way. So I'm 6'3", I'm like 210.
What a few people taller than me that I've encountered in life.
She's 5'2", barely. Just an itty bitty thing. So, I mean, when she was at 6 months, she looked like she was at 10 months. I mean, she was just very, very, very pregnant.
But 6 months times 2.
Yeah. But for the most part, the pregnancy went fairly well. She had to go through some bouts of, take it easy, bed rest. We want to make sure that you're doing well. And there was one night that she was just in a lot of pain. So I had to drive her to the ER, went through a lot of different tests, and they gave her the maximum amount of morphine that they could without causing any problems to the babies. And she was still in pain. At that, they just kind of chalked it off to pre-labor stuff because apparently a lot of her symptoms weren't classic symptoms that they could pinpoint it. And so we just went with that. A few more weeks went by, and Eric and I were carpooling, and he was the one driving.
Name drop.
Sorry.
It's okay. It is all good.
So we're carpooling. He was the one driving at that time, and she called me telling me that she was in a lot of pain still. So her friend took her to the hospital, which was just right up the road from us. And that was on a Friday. So as soon as we got off work, he took me up to there and dropped me off. And I pretty much stayed there the entire time. There's no way I could leave her. There was just no way. They came in and says, okay, well, there's a lot of different possibilities what's going to happen. There may be some preterm labor. We may have to induce labor or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and inject, give you some steroids to help mature the lungs. And they were doing a battery of tests. They were checking a bunch of different things. They couldn't really find anything. And then that following Tuesday, they finally came in and said, okay, so we figured out what was going on. And they name dropped HELP syndrome, but didn't fully explain everything. And said, well, this is a pregnancy-induced disease, and the only way to cure it is to have the kids. So we're like, okay, cool. Meanwhile, in the background, you can see all these people rushing around, getting the OR ready, and they're just mad dashing everywhere. But we were both just kind of in shock and a little worried about, but not, we're just kind of in that what's happening phase. Like we couldn't really absorb everything that was happening, and the doctor wasn't really explaining everything. And I get it, because he was probably doing his best to keep us as calm as possible.
Yeah, because, I mean, considering the condition, the last thing you want to do is to stress out the mother.
Yeah, and at this point, we really didn't know. But they did say, okay, so instead of doing the transverse, which is the classic cesarean cut, they had to do from like pubic bone going up a bit so they can get in there and check the liver and make sure everything was okay. At that point, I still wasn't really comprehending of why are we doing that. It was just like, okay.
They didn't have time to explain. So this is what HELP syndrome is. This is why we have to do what we need to do. They were busy like, yeah, we're saving your wife and your kids.
And it wasn't even really saving your wife and kids. It was just like they weren't telling us that. It was just, this is what we have to do in order to get rid of what your problems are. And this was like the epitome of emergency C-section. Like I could not be in the room. I stood through there was the window, a hall.
Can I pause you for a second? For people to understand who you are a little bit more and what kind of, I'm sure, emotional anguish you went through by not being allowed to be in there. You are the quintessential manly man. You're not toxic manly man. You are, I am a father figure. I am the husband. I am the protector. And, I mean, you really are. That's always been a theme that I've noticed in you, and I've always admired that. You stand up to injustice, and you do what's right, whether it's nice or not.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned to tone it down or find a different avenue to pursue my thoughts and everything. But yeah, I mean, if I feel there's something wrong, I'll say something. But yeah.
Yeah. And to have you not be able to be there to even hold your wife's hand had to be excruciating.
It killed me. It really did. I was looking through 2 windows to try to see anything that I could. And all I saw were just doctors and nurses moving around and doing all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden I hear a little cry, little feet come in as they're moving one baby out. And then a few minutes later, the next baby, and I was able to walk with them into the NICU, and I got to see them. And I didn't see my wife for a while because they were taking care of her and sewing her up and everything else. And it wasn't until like a few weeks or maybe a month or so later that she went into her office where she works, and the doctor that she was working for broke it down to her and told her what was happening or what happened. And the bottom line is your count for your platelet levels at 150,000 is considered low, like really low at 150,000. She was down to like 5,000. She was so close to all out, just bleeding out on that table that it wasn't until that moment that I lost it and realized I was so damn close to raising. And they were saying there was really no worries about the babies at all. But they didn't tell us how close to death that she was.
Right. I remember that at the time you talked about how they were concerned about the lung development and that they wanted to make sure that the lungs were developed enough so they don't stick to each other, causing the kids to essentially suffocate by lack of being able to open their lungs.
Well, yeah, 9 weeks is the last part of the pregnancy. That's when the lungs start to mature. 9 weeks, they still weren't really mature.
No, it's usually at the 8-week mark is where they're like, okay, now you can have the kids anytime.
Yeah.
Because now it's just weight gain. But that 1 week, holy shit, does it make a difference.
Well, when they were born, one was 3 pounds, 6 ounces, and the other one was 3 pounds. She dropped down to like 2.5 pounds during the first like week or so. And it was just freaking out thinking of what's going to happen. The one that was 3 pounds, the next day when I saw her after she was delivered, she was intubated. She wasn't intubated when I was there, and I was kind of freaking out, like, what happened? And they said that it's standard sometimes with the anesthesia that one of them or sometimes the babies will come out and they just were kind of lazy at breathing. But on top of being the early pregnancy, they were like, we don't know exactly how long she'll have to be intubated for. She was intubated for 1 day. She was just basically like, nope, I'm good. Get this off.
I take it that attitude exists today.
Yeah, that was the one you saw earlier. She definitely
She wears that attitude like a coat.
Oh, yes.
Just
And
like Daddy. Just like
the emotional roller coaster had to be pretty like pretty unbearable. Like to hear your significant other be in so much pain, that a friend needs to take them, and then the joy of hearing your beautiful babies cry for the first time, and look, they're good, they're healthy, and come back and like, why are they intubated all of a sudden? Like,
why is one wasting away?
Okay,
Why is the other intubated?
And then you go, everything is good.
One was dropping weight severely, and it was just pretty. But they kept reassuring it's just sometimes that happens with the kids or whatever. But she started gaining weight, and the rough part was like every day after work, regardless if every day, as soon as I was off work, I was up there, and we spent as much time.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. We had to go. If I remember correctly, my ex-wife and I, we actually delivered a care package for you guys because you didn't want to go anywhere.
Nope.
And you had some needs that needed to get met, so we ran the errands for you.
Yeah. There was times if I could stay there, I could. Well, my wife was still recovering. I tried to stay there as much as I could, and basically the only time that I left to come home was just to grab a fresh pair of clothes and shower. So the next morning, I would go straight to work from the hospital.
Yep.
And then
go straight back from hospital to work, from work to hospital. That was your existence for a while.
Yeah. That's the day that's the time when I existed on the big cans of Green Monster. I was down in those things like nobody's business just to stay away. But and there was that mix of feelings of just the new father high, being happy that I finally have kids that that are here. But at the same time, it's
no slam against your son. Just like I was I was happy my daughter was born. No slam against my son.
Yeah, no, exactly. So my wife had a previous, a son from a previous.
Yeah, Dave and I have very similar stories.
Yeah, and that's my boy. I mean, that's straight up my boy.
Yeah, just like that's my boy. It may be from a previous, but that's my boy.
Yeah. But it's like you still get that new dad high with new kid and everything else. But at the same time, it was just that the hurt of having to leave, because when my wife had to come home and we still had to leave the kids in the NICU, it was heartbreaking. I don't think, I was sad that I had to leave them, but the worst part was seeing how broken my wife was. And she cried every single time all the way home. And then sometimes when we're trying to go to bed, because she hated being away from them, she felt it was her fault. She felt that, she was the reason why they had to be, like her body just couldn't, so she blamed herself.
You can't blame, I understand it. You blame yourself because your body couldn't do it. But it's not anything against you, the person, that your body, which is a separate entity, couldn't handle it. If willpower alone could have done it, she would have.
Yeah, it was definitely rough watching her go through that and seeing the heartbreak that she had. But the moment we got to the NICU, she lit up. She was so happy just watching them. And we had to watch them for a while. They were in there for a month before they got to the 5-pound mark when we could take them home. And it's very rare that if there is a premature labor for twins, that both of them get to go home at the same time.
Yeah.
This happened because there was a series of things that the nurses and the doctors wanted to try. Once they got to a point where they were basically stable enough and started gaining weight in the little incubators, they had the brilliant idea of, okay, they don't need to be in these anymore. They can be in the little crib things. They co-slept them. They put them right next to each other. The moment that they put them in there together, everything, they started gaining weight. They started flourishing. They started showing
wow. Imagine that. They literally started their entire existence sharing a space together.
Yeah.
Separating them is probably the worst thing you could do.
But let me tell you, though, there was times during the pregnancy, they were yin-yang. One was head down, one was head up, and they were kicking and punching the crap out of each other while they were still in there.
Yeah.
Which still mimics how they live today.
I was going to say, if I know your kids, because I know you and I know your wife, and nurture, nature, all that. Yeah, I'm sure they still beat the crap out of each other.
Oh, they fought like cats and dogs, but the moment I threatened to separate them, they started crying. They're like, "No, I need my sister."
That whole thing
How
of
old are
like,
they now?
you may be able to pick on, just because I pick on my family doesn't mean you get to pick on my family.
Exactly.
How old are they now?
They are going to be 18 in December.
Oh, wow.
I actually wrote a song for them too, a lullaby.
Yeah,
It didn't quite wind up being a lullaby. It was intended to be one, but it turned into something a little more emotional.
And I don't know where the hell it is today. So yeah, if you still have it, definitely want.
Oh yeah, I have it up on a share site just for that very reason.
All right, link it to me. I'll grab it.
I'm doing that right now.
But yeah, I mean, up until things were explained to her about what happened to her and the HELLP syndrome and everything, it's something I'd never heard of. It's a very rare disease, and
where preeclampsia and eclampsia are not rare.
Yeah, that's like common, not just rare. It's listed as very rare. So yeah, leave it to me and my family to have something very rare.
The story of everyone that comes in my life, I swear to God.
I think what they're saying is it's fewer than 20,000 cases per year.
And considering how many pregnancies there are per year, that's rare.
And I'm not sure if they're documenting this as worldwide or just internationally, but I mean, I think it's all domestic cases that they're looking at.
And still, we're the third most populous country on Earth.
Yeah.
So it's likely that we have also the third highest number of pregnancies on Earth.
But yeah, I would say that the emotional roller coaster was the ups and downs of having to leave the kids, and then the day we got to bring them home is, I don't know if you guys ever seen Knocked Up. It's a
God, so long ago.
Well, at the end of the movie, when the dad was taking the mom and the newborn baby home, he was going like 10 miles an hour on the freeway.
I remember that. Okay, make sure the baby's okay. Make sure the baby's okay. Oh, the baby shifted just a little bit. Can you make sure that they're still protected 100%?
That was me. I was literally doing, I think, 55 in the slow lane, and people were honking. I'm like, I don't give a shit, whatever. I think I was probably doing 50. I don't care. I'm like, yeah, that was that whole protective. I want to make sure everything, because it was like, wait, we fought for them. I'm going to do everything that I can to protect them.
And I can tell you that it was a little intimidating helping you to pick up your kids from daycare, putting one of them in the car seat and carrying out to the car, because it's like, man, if the slightest little thing happens, I'm going to get my ass whooped.
Yeah, the whole mama bear syndrome was definitely a daddy bear for a while.
Oh, yeah. You're definitely Papa Bear.
But yeah, it was very, very scary. I mean, like I said, it's not knowing what was going on, but the moment I found out about it, the moment we read up on it, it was just that it kind of hits you right in the soul. You know, not just square in the face or the heart. It was like the whole soul was just. I'm glad everything worked out, but damn, I could have lost her and raised them without her. And that, I mean, even to this day, when I think about it, it's still heartbreaking. Because I can't imagine my life without her, and I can't imagine them not knowing. Your wife
reminds me a lot of one of my aunts that passed away suddenly a couple years ago. Short little fireball, deathly loyal to family and friends, has a lot of love to give, and is feisty as all fuck.
With the complications, and finding out about it later with your wife, and having to have your daughter intubated, did that lead to any knee-jerk reactions of, put them in bubble wrap type of protection after the fact?
I think I'm just naturally like that to begin with, but at the same time, I was still kind of if I was doing something like playing with them a little rough or whatever, it's like some people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Shut up, it's my kid." Because I know I'm not doing it too hard. But I mean, if somebody else would do it right away, I'm like, "What?" So
right.
whenever
you could trust, your limits, your kids' limits. You don't know other people knowing that.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the whole protective nature went, whenever we went, we were actually, when we got the girls home, we had a co-sleeper that just basically connected to the side of the bed, and we had
those
them,
things are the best.
we had them on her side for at least another month or so. And for most people, when you have a signal pregnancy, it's like, okay, so the mom gets up, does this, or the dad gets up and does that, or blah, blah, blah. No, we both had to get up. There was just no trading off or whatever. We both got up. We had to feed them every 3 hours because they were still underweight. So we had to make sure that they were progressing.
And of course, since it's done in tandem, you can't just do one then the other. One wakes up crying, they both wake up crying.
Hence the reason why I was like sleep deprived for the first couple of years, because of all of the stuff that we had to do. Well, they wound up developing GERD, which was kind of like, when babies spit up. But this was every time they fed, they had to be sat up at an elevated or fed elevated for at least 20 minutes before you could put them down. So you can imagine we had to get up, feed them every 3 hours, wait another 20 minutes or so before we could put them back down, try to fall asleep, wake up again, do the whole process all night long, every day, and
And you're not even getting 3 hours of sleep, because that 20 minutes after they fed, that's 20 minutes of less sleep that you're getting because you have to hold them up. So and then you have to fall back asleep again. So you're probably getting what, in a stretch, 2 hours 15 minutes, 2 hours 20 minutes each time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like collectively every night we're probably going to sleep and getting like 5 hours on a good night, but that's stretched out and broken up throughout the night. But you know what? It's like those are the things that we had to do, and those are the things we were okay doing, because it's like that's a part of the process.
Hi, Cat just joined to the chat.
Hello.
Chat's a little bit quiet tonight so far.
But yeah, I mean, it got to the whole protective thing is when we basically sheltered at home for about a month before we ventured out to see people or whatever. And then once we got more comfortable getting them out in the world, I was still the one hovering over them. Like Joe would be out looking or talking to people, and I'm like feeding them, changing the diaper. She kept asking me if I needed help. I'm like, no, I'm good. You relax. Because in my head, I'm like, you did all the hard work and you almost died, so I'm going to do this.
Yeah, let me do what I can do.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was exhausting, emotional, and sometimes it was damn near draining, but I mean, it was what I had to do to, I guess, do what I can, because like I said, is every time something happened, I just kept thinking I could have been doing this by myself. So every time she would, I'm going to go get the bottles ready. I'm like, nope, I got it. I'm going to go, nope, I got it.
Now, I got it. And I'm playing devil's advocate. Don't hate me for it. I can't imagine that's also been. I mean, I can see that for your wife. I'm just looking at if I was in the same position. You're taking away your own wife's ability to provide for herself and her kids too, because you were so hypersensitive to that. Did she ever address that with you?
I think there was just some times where she felt bad that I was doing all of these things. But I told her, this is something that I need to do because you've done all this and you're still doing more. I mean, I never fully explained to her that a lot of my drive was, I'm protective, I'm loving, and I'm giving. But it was still in the back of my head. It's like, you almost fucking died. So I'm going to be doing all of this shit that I can because, no, you deserve your rest. You deserve as much. You deserve to take as much breaks as you can.
It's not like she gets a free ride because there's two of them, so and you can't do it by yourself.
No, for sure. I mean, once they got a little older, they were easier to manage. I was feeding them sometimes by myself, just because she was at work or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have any problems taking care of them all the time, doing what I need to do. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the emotional stuff, I still think about it. It's still rough. And there's been times where, kids, they become teenagers, they start to grow into their own, they get rebellious, they piss you off to no hell. And then there's times where I get so mad at them, but then sometimes it creeps into my head. You've gone through a lot, and they still have. There's been a lot of issues that they've gone through throughout their life that, I mean, we're just kind of realizing that maybe it was because of they were born so premature. They started out way behind on things, then they started advancing, and then certain things have kind of pulled them back. And it's like, well, maybe those are the latent health issues that they are getting because of it.
Yeah, and I mean, there really is. I mean, that is a real issue.
Yeah.
And Sarah actually dropped in a pretty good comment about how you were being so caring, saying that, you do the hyper, I'm going to do this, you take your rest. I'm going to do this, you take your rest. She said, it's a blessing too, though. It for me at least was months before I felt human again. Your body is wrecked, and then all your nutrients and energy go from making a human to making milk. And of course, for your wife, it was making 2 humans to making milk for 2 humans.
Yeah, that was something I was going to touch on too. Is that during the time that, the recovery for her C-section was a bit longer than the normal C-section because the way they had to go in and check her liver and everything.
Yeah, it was a bigger incision for one.
But once she started producing, and obviously we had to pump all the milk and everything, she was producing so much milk and taking it into the NICU that they told her, you don't need to bring any more. You brought in way too much. And then it turned into that our freezer was stocked into it. And then once the girls came home and we had to do the feedings and everything else, she was so exhausted because when I had to go to work, she had to take care of them by herself while still trying to recover from her surgery and being totally exhausted.
And still producing milk.
Well, she wound up stopping producing milk. She stopped producing milk because she was just so exhausted that that portion just started shutting down. So, of course, that hit her again, and she felt awful that she couldn't do this or that. But we wound up having enough damn milk that I think it was like at least 2 to 3 months worth of formula for the kids.
Wow.
and every nurse, every doctor, every pediatrician was like, no, I mean, the first 2 to 3 months is the best part of the nutrients that they needed. So
I mean,
that's part of the start.
I mean, to be fair, the colostrum is literally the most important part.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember the word for it.
Yeah. I was sitting there going, no, meconium's that tarry shit that the babies poop out the first few times. What was it? Oh, yeah, it's colostrum.
It's a little different. A little different.
They're associated. They both happen for a short period of time at the same time.
If one's in, one's out.
Yep. Oh, we got a porch drunkie in the chat. What's up, May? Been a while since I had to drop that podcast name.
Okay, I was like, there's an inside joke there we don't know about.
It's not really an inside joke. So May and her husband comes on sometimes in the chat. It's Tommy No Name. They run a podcast called The Porch Drunkies. My very first time ever on a podcast was going over to their house, having some beers, and just shooting the shit, recording it as a podcast.
Sounds like a good time.
And we actually did a crossover episode where they came on, and I faded out our intro and faded in their intro, and they were on as the Porch Drunkies. It was a great episode.
Okay.
Nice.
I have to go back and listen to that one.
So I don't know what else that I could say about any of that. If there's questions or shoot away. I mean,
but like I said, I mainly wanted to focus on your mental state on it because, everyone always talks about the mom's mental state. And they even talk about what the kids probably went through. I like also saying, well, let's talk about the support system that they have around them and how they're stressing out too. Like,
I have a question.
Oh, go for it.
So, a couple months in, you find out just how close you're to losing the love of your life. And being the protector that you are, I'm sure knee-jerk reaction is to not further stress her out. How did you handle going through that stress? Did you share that stress with her? Did you?
Oh no, he shared that with Bo and me. Trust me on that one.
That's what I'm getting at is how did you?
Oh, and Bo just jumped in the chat too, by the way.
Yeah.
How did that work within your family unit? Did you choose to share it with her? Did you just go to your boys and get it out that way to protect her from it? Does she know what happened, what you went through? That outpouring of emotion.
We're pretty open with what we talk about, but yeah, I didn't want to put any other stress on her to make her feel bad again, because every little thing that happened, she blamed herself for it. Plus, I was just so driven with that protective mode and caring mode that I just went into this state of do it now, think about it later. And when I was with the guys at work and we would just get on top of some conversation, I'd be like, God, I'm tired or this, and then we would talk. And when we found out that she almost died, I told them, and it was just kind of hard to grasp, but at the same time, you're in such a programmed robot mode that there was no stopping. Even if I was exhausted, I couldn't. It wasn't an option for me, because it's like, if I stop, then what happens?
Yeah.
And I could tell you
Did she ever?
Oh, I was gonna say that Bo and I, we did have conversations on the side, and dude, our souls wept for you because we could just see what you were going through. I mean, you were, for lack of a better way of putting it, you were a husk of the man that we knew. You were an automation, driven purely by your determination to do the right thing. Admired the hell out of it, but at the same time, part of you was dead.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say dead. It was just exhausted. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I loved what I was doing. And it was just, but yeah, it's like after a while you get into this routine that you have to do X, Y, and Z without any adequate rest, that, you get this exhaustion, but I didn't feel any resentment. I didn't feel any, this sucks. It was just, I got to do what I got to do,
And now that Bo has read the Wheel of Time, no, you can go ahead and go with what he said because it's awesome. But I was just going to say, now that Bo has read the Wheel of Time, every time you start talking about you just did what you needed to do, I know that he's thinking the same thing I am, which is duty is heavier than a mountain, but you still do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Bo commented and said, Dave and I were actually able to bond through this. Our wives were both pregnant. Their due dates were a few weeks apart, and both of our wives ended up going into labor 7 weeks early. It was rough. His girls were in the NICU for what felt like forever. It was rough that Chloe came home and his daughters were stuck in the hospital for so long.
Yeah.
It was really weird because when we first started talking, the due dates were, really close to each other. But then this happens, and then it happens with Bo, and it was like, what just happened? Why are things paralleling? What's going on?
And then it's like, I saw with Bo, he felt this intense guilt that Chloe got to come home while your kids didn't.
I never felt, I was genuinely happy, but what was great was the fact that I had somebody that I can relate to in a situation that's not very relatable. It's because it's so rare.
You had your battle buddy.
Yeah, because it was so rare and that there was so much similarities with everything, it helped me get through a lot of that even when I was feeling pretty exhausted and run down, just having these conversations picked me back up again. And it was just, and I never carried it, at least I didn't feel I carried it, that it was a weight. It was just determination, drive, and the will to want to do this. because I fought to have these kids with her. We are going through all of these things, so I'm not going to stop. And I don't regret it. I don't feel bad about it. I don't look at it as I wish. I mean, yeah, I wish things could have gone different, but you know what? They went the way that was supposed to be. I mean, it could have been so much worse, and I'm glad it wasn't. You know,
if it wasn't for modern medicine, it would have been worse.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even had the option to raise the kids. That if it was back far enough, the option would have been taken from you.
Yeah. But I mean, it's been a definitely great journey. It's definitely a great experience, and to learn these things and to hear other people when they've gone through different scenarios and what has happened. It also makes me is more sympathetic to what people go through and what women in general go through in a regular pregnancy.
Oh, and by the way, I did send you the link to the song, just so you know.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's as far as mental health or how it feels. There's times where I just felt run down and I need time to myself. I think in the later years, that's when I start taking more time for myself. Like sometimes just want to be by myself, go for a drive to the grocery store, pick up a few things. I know one of my daughters, she just loves to go with me because she just loves those little things. But there's times where I'm like, honey, I need to do this on my own. I need to go be by myself. And it isn't anything of regret, and I don't go through like an emotional breakdown. It's just that calm of not having to do anything else other than just one thing helps take the burden off of just having to do so much. And then it kind of gives you a little bit of recharge. So you can just take that deep breath, rub dirt on your hands, and get back to it.
Sarah asked, did your wife struggle a lot with being home?
Yeah, she struggled a lot. I mean, especially when I had to go back. So I started working with E at that job really early on. So I didn't accrue enough time to take off. So I think it was just a week or two that I got to take off. After
and that was before the state even provided paternity leave.
Yeah. So this was back when it was just, you don't have the PTO? Well, here. And I was too new that I couldn't take any kind of FMLA or anything of
sort. Yeah, you were still a temp, if I remember correctly.
I think I just converted but it still was just not enough.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I only was like a week or two. I don't even remember how long it was, but she was still recovering from her surgery and then being exhausted that she hated it when I left because it was just really rough on her, because then she had to do everything on her own all the way up until I got home. But the moment I got home, it's like, I'm here, I'm taking over, you go sit down.
And look who joined us.
There he is.
What up, Bo?
Oh.
Hey.
It's like old times, but remote.
What?
It's like old times, but remote. You're not just sitting across the supply stations this time.
In the dark corner, though, like last time.
Yeah. We had the scrub station, the one that I kept playing around inside.
Yeah.
Quite literally. Yeah. With Bo, again, I had forgotten about how you guys had that so many similarities there because I was so focused on helping you. And Bo's, yeah, it was early, but his was about as cut and dry an early pregnancy as you could get, if I remember correctly. Kind of like what my parents had with me. Momentary, oh shit, this sucks, and then, all right, you get to go home and have a nice life. So yeah, I wanted to bring Bo in for his perspective of this too, considering he has a unique position on this.
So my audio was messing up. What were you just talking about? I had to set up my headset.
I was just saying that. Shit, you're asking me to remember something I just said about ADHD.
I'm just kind of talking about the similarities between yours and mine, and that because I had somebody that was closely going through similar situations, that it kind of helped me get through a lot of the stuff because I have somebody that I can relate to and bounce exhaustion thoughts off of and recharge and go back and do it again.
Yeah, and all I had was I was young and had a kid, and everything went perfectly normal for mine, except that we had to induce. So yeah, I could not relate.
Yeah, and we'd struggled. So we struggled to have our first. It took us like 3 or 4 years of like, we hadn't gotten into the IVF route, mainly because we were young and couldn't afford it at that point. So we got lucky that the cheaper, help worked. And then Chloe, was kind of, we went off of everything. We gave up, and the next month we had her, or we got pregnant with her, and it was rough. I don't know. For me, Dave, it was kind of, I did have some guilt. It's like, wow, our situations were so similar. Obviously, you had twins, but we brought Chloe home the next day. She was 7 weeks preemie, and she didn't weigh anything. She was, when we took her home, she was under 4 pounds. She was like 3 pounds, 15 ounces or something crazy like that. And we're like, you can't let us bring her home. Like, yeah, she's testing everything fine. Like all the APGAR and everything was perfect. She was breathing. We brought her home, and we had to feed her through a tiny little syringe with a tube on the end of it, like to put in her mouth. But as rough as all that was, at least mine were at home, right? So it was like, well, gosh. And then it allowed me to like put myself into being there for Dave, because, hey, Dave's got it rougher than I do. Raina didn't have to have a C-section. She had a traditional birth. So like in a lot of ways, ours was much easier, but it's still a rough thing. And it was definitely helped me, man, having someone to relate to, like you said.
I think one of the harder things too, while the girls were in the NICU, is that because of their situation, they had to have feeding tubes run through their nose down to their stomach. And it's rough to see when they're in the incubators and everything. They had all these leads and things all over them attached to wires and everything, and we couldn't touch them for the longest time. And
I still remember the day you finally got to touch them. You were basically bouncing everywhere. You didn't walk, you bounced and floated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was amazing, because it's like that whole thing. It's like something is, it's like you get this, hey, I got car keys for you when you turn 16, but it's yours, but you can't touch it yet. But yeah, that was pretty rough to have to see that, but there was the progression. And like I said, it was just going home, and it tore my wife up, and then having to come to work, it tore her up. She had severe postpartum depression, and it was something that I didn't know what to do to help her. And so the only way I could help her was to just take over when I was there and just drive everything that I could and make her rest and relax and basically cater to her as much as I could, because I get to leave. I get to go to work. I get to socialize. I get to kind of take my mind off the situation to work and everything, but she couldn't. She was always stuck in that. And I think that was the other reason that once the girls got older and we went to like barbecues and stuff, that I was okay with her socializing while I took care of the kids, because it's like
it's her turn now, right?
Yeah, it's like she had to do all of these things, and she went through all this stuff and almost fucking died. That it's like, well, this is what I am going to do.
With 18 years to think about it, if you could whisper in your ear 18 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Ooh.
And not just that, Bo, looking at how you supported David, how you supported Bo, would have you done it differently? Because in the moment, it's easy to get lost in the moment, and you're just acting purely on instinct. But now that you have time to think it through, it sounds like you were there for each other the way you needed to be, but
I don't think so. I think we had a good connection. The same with E, is that, even if there was a lack of, I don't know what to say, one of us would crack some sort of joke or do something to just break the tension. And that was all that was needed. Sometimes it was just the right moment for the right stupidity or the right whatever, and it worked.
Oh, and Dave, the three of us are the kings of stupidity. So.
Just so you know, Dave, the day that I drank the citrus air freshener out of the bathroom, that was for you, bro. I knew you needed that.
I was just talking about that earlier too.
So we probably need to explain that one. So
we did. We
talked about it earlier.
Oh, nice.
Talking about your first day at work, that you got to see the barbecue and me strapping that can underneath Dave's chair. And you're like, okay, so this is the kind of place I'm working for.
No, really what it was is, I'm in a better place now, because where I came from was a corporate call center that they like did every form of call center work you could think of. And they would like rotate you around from tech support to cable sales. And it's like, screw that shit. So no, it was like, these people know how to have fun and they don't take themselves too seriously. Cool.
Well, we were the black hole of that support center. They sent managers to us to die because they knew that they couldn't do anything about us. I gamed more than I think anybody else gamed on that entire floor, but my numbers were so fucking good, and there was no rules explicitly against gaming.
Yeah, I think the great thing is that we goofed around, we joked around, we did all the stuff. We had a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, when it came down to it, when we had to put our heads down, we put our heads down and we got shit done.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did I get called into those meetings where it was just me? I go into a conference room on the phone and I'm talking to project support engineering, I'm talking to development, I'm talking to all. And my job is on the fucking line because some hospital went critical and I happen to be the one that touched the case.
Yeah.
Because I was the one that you went to for that, because that was kind of the role that I took.
Yeah, it definitely was a great place, I think. Yeah. And that was my first tech job, just getting out of school. So I couldn't have picked a better company at the time and a group of people to work with and the friends that I had there. I mean, a lot of stuff that I've learned and a lot of my philosophies and things that I think about and the way I look at stuff came from there. You know, that helped me carry it on to the job that I'm at now.
Yeah, that job did the same to me. It really changed everything for me. Philosophy and everything.
It was the beginning of my career.
What was that?
I was just saying that job was the beginning of my professional career, I would say.
I think a lot of it is how I am today. That definitely helped shoot me in a direction that I never thought that I would go into. Like I've always been, I like to teach, I like to help, I like to protect. But I never saw myself as like a leader. But I'm a supervisor now, and it's not something that I ever saw myself as doing. But once I recognized that's what I was, that's where I went, and I think that helps me how I talk to people too, because a lot of the ways that we would talk to each other was dependent on the situation. We would call somebody out point blank, or we would joke about it point blank, or we would be more kid glove, depending on the situation. It could be with the same person. It was just all about the moment, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was,
I mean, we all prided ourselves on doing a good job.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that also derived from the journey that I was going through of having to deal with the different aspects of parenthood and the way I went through parenthood. I mean, because everybody who goes through it goes through a different way. You know, you can't really compare, this, and this. But yeah, having that thought of starting out fighting hard for, a family and then almost losing them kind of gives you a different perspective of life on how to drive forward or not always take it so serious, because, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. And even though Oz didn't ask me, I'm going to throw myself into this anyway, because it was us as a triangle. I wouldn't have done anything differently than I did for you guys, and I would happily do all of that and then some again if it was needed. Happily. You guys
are trying me to disclude you. My bad.
It's all good. I know you didn't mean to. You were focusing more on the guests, and that's fine.
Yep. Well, I was focusing because they were going through such a similar situation,
right? And it's like, even though I couldn't truly relate to their situation, I could at least empathize with what they were going through, the struggle.
And,
I mean, it's just kind of positive that just being there sometimes is enough.
Yeah, and that was the thing, is I never looked at it as, oh, Bo understands more than he does. It was just, yeah, we could talk about the similarities in certain situations, but when he spoke to us about things, or we spoke to him about things, it wasn't like, oh, you don't know what's going on, so whatever.
No, because Dave, what it was is we were all available for each other, right?
Yeah.
We worked in a triangle, call it a tripod, whatever you want, and it was, we all overheard what was going on with each other, and we stepped in and plugged in where it made sense.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
And I was happy just knowing that I'm right there. Even if you didn't want to talk right then and there, I'm there. I'm physically there. I'm emotionally there. I'm mentally there.
And we all knew what was going on in each other's lives. So even if, like, you know, you may not have been helping Dave specifically with what he was going through on that Tuesday afternoon, but you were involved enough to where we had the context on each other to be able to just be available and listen, you know?
Yeah, I mean, those guys were my support group, and I feel that we were all each other's support group too. And I think that's the best thing that helped me get through the day, no matter what kind of stress or exhaustion I was going through, is that ability to be able to unplug from some aspect of my life, recharge, and then go home. But the harder part was I also felt bad for my wife, because I saw how exhausted she was when I got home. I saw how run down she was, but that's why I was just immediately like, I'm here, I'm taking over.
Because you could, right? Like you were at work getting stressed out, but it was a different type of stress, and you come home and you're like, okay, I can handle this stress now.
Yeah.
This is where it's nice to be able to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the great thing about her is that even though she was exhausted and run down, she never was like, here, you take them. It was just, nope, I automatically took over. I started doing stuff. She never once was like, I've had enough. You know, she would tell them sometimes, she's like, I need to go lay down. I'm like, okay, go. Or I'd walk in the door and like, I'm here, I'm taking over, go lay down, go take a nap, go do something.
Dave, I'm trying to remember, did she end up with postpartum after the girls?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she had severe postpartum for a while.
Yeah. I think she was borderline postpartum psychosis at some point.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I don't.
It's like you basically, like, if you could write a book on what's the worst shit you could throw at someone during a pregnancy without costing a life, I think that you basically got it.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of those, and I never took it as one of those, oh, I have it so bad, she has it so bad, why are we going through this when we fought so hard? It was just, it's life, you know, it's like things happen, you got to keep rolling with it.
Well, you both are realists, and you're both optimistic. Sometimes mildly optimistic, but you're both realists and you're optimistic. I could see why you would never say, oh God, I'm being victimized. You're like, well, this just is what it is, let's push through.
Well,
I chose to be in this, I chose to do this, and no matter what the situation is, if I chose to be there, no matter the outcome, I got to keep going with it.
So Dave, that was an area that I really didn't have a lot of context for you with what she was going through in that perspective. I do now, because Raina had severe postpartum with Jack, like horrible. I'm curious, what was it like for you when she was going through that? Or let me ask you first, what was her postpartum like? Was it that she had no connection to the girls and just couldn't feel like how did it manifest for her?
Terrified. She blamed herself for the early, the premature. She blamed herself because her body gave out and couldn't produce any more milk. She blamed herself because she was just so exhausted that it was hard for her to focus on her own to take care of the girls when I wasn't here. And then I also felt that she kind of felt bad that I would work all day, come home and immediately take over and do all this stuff.
But again, that's where traditionally guys can compartmentalize, and we don't see it as an extension of work. This is a new compartment. This is a new thing that I've been charging up for all day.
Yeah, and she did have a little bit of no connection with the kids. And I think maybe it was because of how energized I was and driven to take care of everything, that I was kind of the more energetic, playful one to bond with them and make them happy and smile and everything else. And she was just too exhausted to do anything. And that made her feel bad. But she, after a while, realized it's not her fault. It was just the way things went, and that I was always happy to do what needed to be done. And yeah, she always kind of felt that even later when she wasn't having the postpartum anymore, the girls were severe daddy's girls.
Yeah, Sarah made a comment that's super relevant to what you're saying now. Is after birth, you have so much coming at you as a parent, doubly with twins. There's no time to downshift and deal with what you've just been through, because all of your focus is on the kids. My thought on that is like, those things that we don't deal with, mental health wise, the lasting effects they can have.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I do a lot of thinking, and I do a lot of self healing, I guess. And I try to put myself in other people's shoes so I can understand them and see where I relate to it, and then try to work with them. Sometimes my therapy is helping others, especially if I can relate to them.
Right.
Hey, so you just named why this podcast exists, at least in part.
Yeah.
Me helping others helps me with my own mental health. It does.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a difference between ignoring
Okay, thank you.
mental health issues by throwing yourself into somebody else's issues. But if you can find that therapeutic value and that connection with the other people that you have and go, okay, I see those similarities. Sometimes you don't understand how you can help yourself, but through talking, you're like, oh, well, I could apply that to myself as well.
Bullseye.
Yeah, you learn as you teach, type of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I spent years, Dave, doing what you said not to do, which was basically ignoring all of my problems and looking for how I can help everybody else. And I thought it was making me feel real great about myself, except, I was ignoring myself completely.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I should feel great about myself. Why am I so fucking miserable?
Exactly.
Yeah, because you forgot to take your own advice or figure out how to deal with your own issues. And sometimes
you play the whole don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and one thing that I learned is that even the hardest stone will give away to the ocean. And if that ocean is stressed, it's going to chip away at you if you don't know how to take care of it.
Well, remember I told you a couple weeks ago, remember that argument I got into, that situation, and the way I tried to basically be okay with it is I told myself I was the facilitator. This was a family event, and I was making it okay that I was not. We got into an argument, and my way was with dealing with it was just telling myself that I was the facilitator, and as long as everybody else was happy, then I'll be happy, and that's bullshit.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you realized that.
It is the last few weeks have been freaking brutal, man. Like the self-awareness hurts.
It does. When you're ready, you're ready, and it hurts.
Yeah, but you're recognizing it. That's the important part. Is now you can move forward with how to fix it and heal it and move on and grow.
Yeah. Dave and I could have had it where I was basically holding you up and he was pounding you with, you need to pay attention to this. You're ignoring yourself, and you would have been in complete denial the whole time. You wouldn't accept it until you were ready to accept it.
So the last 10 years of my life, I've been basically an extremely functional mess. So, yeah, I was oblivious to everything, and I thought that I was doing great.
Yeah, the stories that you shared with me, honestly, they kind of horrified me a little bit.
We'll talk about them on here at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also a thing that we all have had in common is try to deny or help somebody in that denial process, and you get so frustrated with somebody that you just want to slap and strangle them and help them understand what they're doing isn't the right path. But until they are ready to recognize it, you just got to be there for them or let it run.
Yeah, and that's kind of why during my failing part of my marriage, I kind of hid from you, because you were like, you beat me up gently, but you still beat me up, and I wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, and that was it. Is that we would do things in different stages. Like sometimes I was point blank and shot it right down straight, and then other times I tried to give it to you at different aspects where you could understand it, and then it was just sometimes you'd see a glimmer that you were getting it, but then nope, fall right back in again.
The wall would rebuild.
Yeah.
I mean, I still remember,
but that stuff's still there in the back of your head.
Oh yeah,
when you're ready to process it.
Oh yeah, I still remember. I mean, I can still remember the smell and the exact lighting of your living room when you told me point blank, "E, you're off your fucking rocker." That's stuck. I don't know if you even remember saying that to me, but that's stuck. And you were absolutely right. I was fucking insane. I was a desperate man trying desperately to hold together something that I had no power to control. I had no ability to try to save.
Well, it's kind of like that self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, you're so worried that something was going to end that you wound up letting it consume you to the point where you were causing it even further.
Yep.
Because you could not disassociate yourself from that and take that step back.
Exactly.
You know, you're still,
I couldn't see the forest for all the trees.
Or smell the shit from your knees. But that's exactly it. I mean, when it comes to feeling or how to deal with things, I've just always been the person to take it as it comes and then try to process it. I haven't always been the best with it, but I don't know any other way to do it. So I'm that just type of person that shit's there, I got to get it done, and I'll worry about it later. Sometimes I get past the point where it's like, oh, well, it worked out good, so I guess I don't need to worry about it now. And then sometimes because of that, I look back and go, oh, maybe I've let that bled over and not realize it.
Yeah. Man, we've come a long way since those days. I think the last major event that we shared together was the Cedar Fire. I left not too long after that.
I was trying to think, and it's kind of crazy because, like, can we honestly think about the last time the three of us have even been on a phone call at the same time? Like, I've seen you, I've seen Dave through the years, but it's got to have been at least 15 years since the three of us have actually talked together.
Not since I still lived in San Diego.
Yeah, and you'd never know it.
I think I
left in 2006.
There was one time we were still working remotely. I think, we weren't physically talking, but I mean, I know that we used to get on the chats and stuff. But after your stint with Pixis was done, that's when everything just kind of fell apart as far as the communication. It was like the random text or random whatever on Facebook, but then
I'd show Dave a video of you karaokeing or something.
Oh yeah, he was doing the whole KJ thing.
Yep,
that was fun. But anybody? Let's see. I was just reading Kat's comment. It was commenting about the fact that I wish we could do hearts and emotes on comments in the chat. But I mean, did anybody have any questions? Anything else to add about this whole pregnancy thing? Because we're kind of tangenting pretty hard.
Yeah, pretty bad.
We need to do this outside the podcast.
Yeah.
I could talk a little bit about, our experience with, kind of in line with what we were talking about with postpartum, because it was interesting in retrospect, looking back, because it was two different things for both me and my wife. So our third, he just turned 13 a couple months ago, but pretty typical pregnancy. But when she went in, they had to induce her, and so they were pushing some different meds, and we had this nurse that messed up and actually pulled out of the Pyxis machine the wrong meds. I don't know how she did it, whole point of Pyxis is they're not supposed to be able to do that.
Yep.
But
I mean, we should know really well about that.
exactly. And it's funny how quickly your brain falls out when a traumatic event happens, because what they basically gave her, I don't remember the name of the med, I'd have to look it up, but it's basically what they give you when your heart stops and they need to restart your heart. Well, they gave that to her while they were inducing her.
Yikes.
We were sitting there, she's going through labor, and they're like we're timing the contractions and everything, but we're in the hospital, and the nurse comes in, gives her this medication. I think it was through the IV, I don't remember. And she walks away, and about 30 seconds after she walks out of the room, Reina's eyes get huge. She starts freaking out. Her heart rate jumped up to over 200.
Different.
And that sounds like epinephrine.
Yeah, I think it was epinephrine. So it took them a little while. Like it felt like much longer, but it was probably about 10 or 15 minutes to figure out what happened. They gave her something else, but she was exhausted for a good 2 weeks after that. She was pretty much not present. Like we came home and I was taking care of our son, and I didn't
your
realize.
Older kid too.
Oh, older too. Yeah. Which, yeah, the girls. They were great. You know, they were 5 and 7 at the time. So
that's funny. That's what my kids are right now.
Yeah. So imagine throwing another one into the mix, right?
Oh God, no.
Yeah. Then you're playing zone defense as of that point. And
yes.
when your partner's on the bench, you're fucking out of it. So it turns out when she woke up, she just when she came kind of woke up from being out of it for like a week, she had zero connection. She's found out later. She's like, I'd look at him and I'd be like, whose kid is this? Because it's not mine, and I don't have any feelings for it.
Wow.
And it was my mom ended up having to fly up here because we had him after we moved up to Idaho. So like all of our normal support that we had in San Diego was having to now fly up 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So my mom came up, her mom came up, and it was the worst depression she'd had in her life. And she had depression growing up, but talking to her about it later, we realized I wasn't really aware of what she was going through to the extent that she was. Like what I was telling you that she didn't tell me that until about 2 years ago. And it was interesting that, you know, she said that it went on until he was about 3 years old, that I was pretty much doing most of everything because she had no connection at all to him. And of course, what happened at about 3 is that completely swung in the other direction. He became a total mama's boy.
That's my baby.
Exactly. So they're like at the hip now, and he's 13, so he's turning into a teenage boy. So she's having difficulty with that. But it was interesting to find out that I thought this was something that only went on for, you know, a good 6 months or so after. And she just kind of held on to it. And
so you didn't know she was going through it at the time? You weren't aware of that?
At the intensity that it was. And definitely did not realize the guilt that she had thrown on herself for not having feelings towards her kid. Right?
And that ties in really well to the comment that Sarah dropped, Alice.
I was just going to drop that in.
Absolutely, yeah. Sarah. She totally, I think that's what.
Hey, read the question if you're going to answer.
Sorry. So she said, Sarah goes, I imagine the added stress she didn't need right at that moment, birth PTSD times 10. And then she said she wished the whole period, she missed that whole period of post-birth bonding hormones.
And the one that I wanted to mention that Os read that said he was going to comment on, so since he already committed to it, go for it, Os.
I already did.
Oh, then were
I
you
built it into the conversation.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, River, I just did that.
Well, I'm busy also trying to maintain lots of other stuff, so sometimes I get a little distracted.
Okay, you just don't pay attention to me. It's all right.
Wow, you went there.
Hey, you're having to manage 3 people on the line now, man. It's a lot.
Yeah, I'm living.
I never did teach you how to juggle, did I?
Yeah, no, I know how to juggle. I learned that from Bruce, the manager back in the day.
Eklund?
Huh?
Bruce. Oh, I know who you're talking about. I know who our
Yeah,
our
the one that
our manager's manager.
Yeah, he was my manager at the time before he got promoted up. When he taught me how to juggle, I was a temp. Jan still called me by my temp number and not my name at that point, because that's Jan.
If I remember correctly, didn't he also call everybody Trick? Look, Trick.
No, he called me Trick.
I told that to a few other people. So. Yeah, you know, it's funny is that going off of what you were saying, I never even thought of the fact that my wife was going through postpartum depression.
Right.
I just chalk it up to you went through a lot, you're dealing with a lot, you're just exhausted. Let me take over.
And I think that's kind of, so it was much different on this one because there wasn't, you know, I don't know. It felt much different. It was a different event, but I knew that she was recovering from something, right? Something pretty severe. So I didn't even put two and two together that this was something deeper than just, you know, she was exhausted.
Yeah.
Man, I could say that I'm so thankful that I didn't have to deal with a wife going through postpartum that severe. At this point, it's pretty much accepted that almost every woman goes through postpartum after a birth to some degree.
Sure.
But, yeah, I'm so thankful I didn't have to go through something that severe.
Well, it's interesting because what Raina has told me is, you know, she goes, I feel horrible saying this, but she actually can understand where these moms come from that do horrible things to their kids. And her thing is, where's the support for that? Where's the screening for these women when they're leaving the hospital to see if they're okay? You know, because there's a lot of women that are probably going home, and not that they shouldn't be taking their kids home, but maybe they need some supplemental support, and maybe that needs to be covered by their insurance so that, or by whatever, so that they're not going home in a bad mental state, unable to take care of their kids.
A dangerous mental state, let's call it.
For themselves and everybody, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I think now that there are, when they do checkups, they do ask certain questions and everything else. But yeah, I think that should be a proactive thing and not a reactive thing. Like on checkups, it could already be happening, you know, proactive before you take the children home, start reaching out and figuring out. Because a lot of times I think they wait until something is said.
Right.
But I do believe now that when it comes to pregnancies and stuff, when they go home, like during the checkups before the baby is born, or even at the time, that they are giving them information on postpartum depression and signs and things to look for.
And I mean, and we're not even talking about like a full evaluation. We're talking about a cursory screening at every appointment. There's a lot of appointments. You can see how this person's going between appointments.
Yeah, something a little bit more than just a pamphlet. Like, what else can you do? But
And Sarah says you feel like a bad mom, not like it's a medical issue.
And I think that's key right there, right? Because why should you feel guilty about something that is you're sick? It's not something, but you know, even to this day,
I mean,
my wife will
is
carry
health.
things. Yeah, It is. But my wife will still carry stuff. Even you, Dave, I think you were mentioning earlier the guilt about, is what's wrong with things that they're dealing with now, immune system deficiencies and what. My wife will still question if it's because our daughter was 7 weeks premature. And I'm like, okay, well, what difference does that make? We can't do anything about it. Well, it just makes me feel guilty because maybe it was my fault that she was premature. And we've worked through a lot of that, but she went years and years carrying that guilt with her everywhere.
yeah, I think it took us a while to get to that point where it's like, if we recognize that maybe some of this was because of the prematurity, that it's not, it's my fault or whatever. It's just now we understand that comes, we knew or we know that it's a possibility. So instead of looking back of guilt that you had no control over, it's okay, what do we do to move forward? How do we fix it, or at least get the help that's needed?
And Kat asked, is it still that way? I think with the mental health care, more acknowledgement of the issues, there'd be support. If you look at it like over time, though, with pregnancies and giving birth, I mean, 20, 30 years ago, when you had a child and everything went perfectly textbook smooth, the mother could expect to spend probably 2 or 3 days at the hospital just to be sure, just to check up, having that extra care. And where depending on the health system you're with today, if you give birth at 6 a.m., you know, it's not unheard of to be for them to try to send you home before midnight.
Yep.
If everything has gone textbook.
And
so,
I can attest for as recent as 3 years ago, no screenings, not even a cursory screening at a wellness appointment for my son, who actually does have a medical condition, so we did a lot of extra screenings. They never asked once, and how's mom doing?
Yeah.
As simple as that could make a difference. You could catch a few people right there.
My wife, she told her doctor, I wasn't at this appointment, but she told him that she had no connection to our son. She just didn't feel anything. And he goes, that's normal. You'll get over that. Bullshit. That was a red flag that he should have been referring her over, or at least letting her know what she was dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah says, oh, yeah, especially at the time, it's like any other kind of depression in some ways. You can't see the forest through how much you blame yourself. Or even if they do ask, you don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
there is that aspect, too.
Yeah, and Kat added, there's no space. It adds one, especially in the world of COVID, when you have so many people, so many beds taken up. And again, it's going to be different depending on the health system you're with. But a place that is really heavily over inundated with beds, or a lot of beds filled, they may not be taking the time. And then they have some, like I was with the health system that I left because it was like a conveyor belt type of thing. Like, you were in, they feed you pills, they kicked you out.
Ooh, cattle call.
Yeah, it was. I didn't realize what good healthcare was until I had good healthcare. I was like, well, this is it, and I'm surviving. I have, but are you dead? No? Okay, it must be good. And then I'm like, oh, this would have been missing. So it's going to take somebody in the industry to set the standard, and bring those things to the forefront. And it's as easy, like every time you go, they ask you, are you currently in pain? What's your level of pain, 1 through 10, type of things. If they can take the time to ask you that in situations where you're like, I'm not in here because I'm in pain, but you're still asking me. How about we ask some prudent questions before we, release people, to make sure that they're okay, or their newborns are okay. So we're setting people up for success.
Well, and Sarah mentioned it's the stigma too. It was a little bit ago. She said you can't talk about not bonding with your kids your kids are having trouble. And the reality is, I mean, that's why I like this. And Eric, I've been wanting to get involved in this with you for a long time. Sorry.
I know, years.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been wanting to get involved because I think this is how we fix this, right? Is we reduce the stigma by talking about it.
We start with conversations.
Right. And that's what I've been trying to do more and more, is to talk to people, but it's hard because you never know if someone's going to be receptive to it or use it against you. So it's rough. And
it's easier to talk about somebody else's issues. Like, for me, it's easy to talk to David about what he went through because even though I was a part of it, I didn't go through it. It's a lot harder to talk about what you went through yourself.
Absolutely.
Like next week's episode about my disassociation. Yeah. You're welcome to be a part of it now that you've been a part of a podcast now.
Yeah, we'll need to catch up this week offline.
All right. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to talk about these things, and that's why I am so appreciative of every person that comes on this podcast willing to talk about the stuff that's tough to talk about. That's how we get that conversation going. That's how we can start affecting change. That's how we get people to be less stigmatized. How we get people to start feeling that they're not alone. There's power in numbers.
Yeah, something that my wife just brought up too, which goes into what you're saying. Like, she worked in the medical industry. Like I said, she worked at an infertility clinic. So she saw patients that came in and talked to them. And so she knew the signs and symptoms of postpartum depression, but yet while she was going through it, she didn't recognize it. So sometimes when you're in the middle of it, yeah, you don't see it. And then sometimes it just takes the right person to help you recognize what it is before you can start taking the right steps to heal yourself.
How true is that for us, with so many aspects of life? It's you have people who can give the best advice on the planet, but their life will be a wreck. And it's because it's the analogy that I always use. It's like reading a novel. If you have your nose pressed on the page and you're in the story, you can't really see what's going on, but you hold the book an arm's length away and things come in focus. That's why I like asking you the question, like, if you could whisper in your ear 18 years ago, now that you've been through it, what if you taken the same path through the woods? It's easy to get lost in the moment.
It is.
It's easy to take yourself too serious.
It is.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And that's, I think, my thing is I did a lot of things for the wrong reasons for a lot of years, trying to impress people that weren't me. I didn't care what I thought. I cared about what people that I saw a couple times a year thought, and lived my life by that. So for me, back to your question, I feel good about how I was able to support Dave and Eric in those times, but I just wish I wasn't so ignorant about myself. So.
Yeah, but there's one thing to say is that things happen for a reason, and it just wasn't the time to do it. And if you did recognize it at that time, who knows where your path in life would have taken you, and it may have been totally different.
Yes.
You'd be dead in a ditch right now, for all you know.
And maybe that the time that you had to go through this was you had to do it for a specific learning purpose. That it's going to, for you to fully understand what's going through, you had to go through a lot of those drops in life in order for you to understand fully on how to heal and recognize yourself, and then eventually, if you wanted to, help others because you've gone through it. It's one thing to say, oh, I've read all these books and this is what you're going through, blah, 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 blah. But if you haven't personally experienced it, then you don't know how to touch that person appropriately in the not having to report to HR way, but touch them in the right way for them to recognize.
I had a therapist at one point that had a similar diagnosis to myself, and it was interesting how well we were able to communicate and how well he was able to help me understand things. So yeah.
So two things.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, two things. One, I'm trying to remember where they were. Fuck, I had it and it just left. God damn it. All right, so no, but I do remember the one that was the more pertinent of the two, which when you were talking about, like when you were ready and the purpose and all that, Os and I, before he officially became part of this podcast, happened the same day. We were walking around a lake and we talked about how the old cliche saying is that God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And Os, what did you say? Do you remember what you said? Because it was very profound.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I believe that we are all put through things through life that we're strong enough to endure in the moment. I hope this is what you're referring to.
Yeah,
in the
like
moment
when you're ready to learn, that's what it happens.
when you're strong enough, that's when you'll be put through it. And it may not make sense because you could be living the most, the most upstanding life, like righteous in quotes, if you want, and feel like you don't deserve it. Not realize that the reason it's happening is that it's the lesson of learning how to endure that thing, so that at some point you come across somebody who may not be as strong as you, who may not know how to get through that thing. You have the ability to hold their hand, walk side by side, and get them through it. So past you, is lending future person a piece of your strength. Paraphrased.
And I remember the other part of it, which goes to what, you could read all the books, but until you've been through it, you can't really get through to someone and touch them in the non-HR reporting way, as Dave put it, which I loved. It's the same reason I say, if you have never been suicidal, never try to talk someone down who is suicidal, because you will not help the situation at all. You can't. And even if you have been suicidal, my last time I was truly suicidal was 2006. I am so far removed from that now, I don't think I could help talk someone down at this point. I'm too far from it now. But yeah, even when you want to try to help someone, know your limits. And know that when it comes to mental health, if you can't relate to the person, at least can't relate to their emotional state, which there's only so many emotional states that we can feel, find someone else that can. Because you have a very good chance of causing harm.
You can listen, but that's all you should do.
I was just going to say, you can speak less, listen more. And if you can't relate, you can at least let them know they're not alone in that moment.
Like how it was with me and Dave. I couldn't relate because I hadn't gone through it, but I recognized the struggle. I could empathize with the struggle. I could put myself in his shoes going, God, imagine if it was me.
Yeah.
But I couldn't talk to Dave about the first time being able to hold your kids after watching them in NICU for days on end.
Well, and sometimes when you try, it's horrible. I remember
it comes across feeling insincere.
Okay, well, no, I'll give you an example.
Please do.
So it was my director when I was working at a health system. This is about 8 years back.
Isn't it funny that we all have health system experience, though? Just throwing it out there.
I know way too much about health systems. But so we were going down to a trade show in Arizona, and it was me and my director, and very just your typical manager type person that doesn't know anything about what anybody does, right? He's just a manager.
Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. If you're good at what you do, you don't.
If you're a good manager, that's fine, right?
Exactly.
But if you're also not a good manager and you don't know what your people are, then you've got a problem.
And that was every manager at one job in particular that I used to dry heave in the parking lot due to stress. But okay.
So I'm trying to bond with him a little bit because we're on a plane for 3 hours. So we're having this conversation, and it came up. Actually, we were talking about my daughter being premature, and I forget how we got there. I think we were talking about spouses being in the hospital or something. And he goes, "Oh, your daughter was premature?" And I'm telling him, yeah, 7 weeks and this and that, how much she weighed, and he goes, "Oh, my son was premature too. Isn't it just so stressful?" I was like, "Oh, how premature was he?" 3 days.
That's not premature. That is normal.
But he was going on trying to be so supportive, and I understand what you're going through. So, and then he goes. Then I asked him how. I'm like, dude, what? So yeah, you need to have some. You need to be believable, and you need to have some. You truly be able to empathize. Otherwise, you're going to come off as insincere.
Yeah. Now, if you want to talk about a pregnancy that went so long that after the induction, as they tried to pull out the placenta, it literally dissolved in the doctor's hands, making it extraordinarily hard to stop the bleeding. Oh, I could talk about that, but I can't talk about 7 weeks premature. I don't understand that.
No.
I understand what it's like to be told, oh, yeah, by the way, you were 5 weeks premature, because I was. But I can't say that I know from a parent's aspect. Like my dad going, yeah, you were in an incubator and I couldn't touch you. I don't know what that's like. I can only imagine how heart-wrenching it is, but it's only imagine.
Yeah, Sarah made a good comment. It's when you can't actually empathize with a situational example, you come off as emotionally toned down.
Yeah.
Even if you have the best of intentions, right?
Oh yeah.
And I mean, he could have said, "Wow, I mean, my kid was a little bit premature, but not nearly to the level that it was possibly dangerous premature. Mine was just a few days. I can't understand what you went through, but damn, that's some shit." And guess what?
Right.
That would have been sincere.
Yeah, it happens all too often. I've had somebody empathize with me. I told them about how I got shot once. and how, what gang violence did in my life. And they were like, yeah, they try to empathize by telling me about a situation where they were at a fast food joint that got robbed once, and everybody had guns that had nothing to do with him. He's
Right.
across the room. I'm like, cool story, bro. Tell it again. Not that I care. Not that I needed empathy about the situation. Even that's what made it worse. It's like I have long dealt with it, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna try this heartfelt thing," and I'm like, "Man, you really missed.
You missed the mark there, buddy."
You really missed." And then it's like, at least in my example, it became comic relief in my head, but it was really hard. Anything that followed that attempt at empathy came off as it was just all comic relief at that point.
Awesome. I watched Boys in the Hood and I've shot guns. I can only imagine your pain.
Yeah.
That's some tone deaf shit right there. Kind of like,
Uh-huh.
oh yeah, I totally understand what it's like to be up all the time taking care of your baby. When my puppy was sick, dude, what?
Yeah.
I grew up in a crap neighborhood, and I used to hear sirens and gunshots and helicopters, but I could never imagine what it would. I didn't know anybody who got shot. I mean, well, I've known mildly a few people that I went to school with that were killed through gang violence and stuff, but I mean, there's no way I could imagine what it'd be like to get shot at or shot, So if somebody was to tell me, I'd be like, I can't even imagine.
I can tell you what it's like to have a 12 gauge pulled on you, but that's as far as my experience goes. I don't know about when the safety's
that
off.
one's enough.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, it's terrifying. But the safety was still on. Yes, in the moment, that's the first fucking thing I checked. The safety was still on, and they didn't threaten to actually. They didn't actually pull the trigger. They brandished it towards my face. That's scary enough. But I still don't know what it's like to be shot at or shot.
Yeah. And that's just something, it's like, I can only imagine how scary that would feel and that being some excruciating pain, but as a relatable, no.
I was just pissed. I deserve this. As soon as I got shot, I knew, I earned that.
Am I going to die from this? No, I'm not going to die from this. Well, I fucking earned it.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn a lesson from this one.
Oh, I did. I absolutely did.
Wait, here you go. There's a relatable story. Not. You start talking about how you got shot and you're like, oh God, I can only imagine. I played paintball before.
Dude, I got hit with an airsoft in the nuts once. Yeah, Oz has that look of like, yeah, you fuckers.
Yeah. Kids and their toys. but the it's interesting. We hear a lot about what a lot of women go through after giving birth, the postpartum, and a lot of the traumas that have to do with it, but we don't often hear about the experience of the dads. So I'm really glad we're having.
Or another conversation that I want to have, that I have some people that I've talked to that are willing to come on, which just I got to get it organized. Male postpartum is a real thing.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that. That's a Bruno topic right there. We don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah. It's having this conversation, and it's there's a lot that goes into it, even with male postpartum as well. But the going through those traumatic experiences, especially in your guys' experiences, like preemies, almost losing your wife, stuff like that in itself, but then the feeling of being powerless to lift up your significant others as they're going through it, is a big aspect of it.
Yeah,
and we need to normalize.
That definitely was one of the things that, I never looked at it as depressive or postpartum from the male stance, just seeing her go through everything and not, being powerless to do something other than just what I could do when I got home is to help alleviate the stress and let her rest.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when I got up and kissed her goodbye, I saw the fear in her eyes because she was just so exhausted, didn't know what to do, and hated being by herself. And she was just scared to be by herself. And we had friends that would come over and help every once in a while, but that was just every once in a while, you know, not just on a regular basis. So yeah, it was hard. And it was something I never really thought about of her being postpartum until she later told me that, yeah, when she was diagnosed. But it's still one of those things is like, okay, so how do we get past it? What do we do? What can I do? You know?
And if I had the wherewithal to really understand what was going on, I could have asked my ex-wife, who, you know, didn't work at the time and lived, 2 miles from your house, to go and check up on your wife.
Yeah. I mean, again, don't look back and go.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, if I could go back in time, like I said, 18 years ago and whisper in my ear, I could have said, hey, get my ex to actually try to be a little more helpful. But that's also coming from, I know this now.
Yeah, and the question isn't asked to make you guys beat yourselves up, but the advice you would give yourself back then may help somebody who's listening to this podcast, who may go through it in the future, who may know somebody who's going through it now. Because you turned out on the right side of things. You know, you're here, your children are good and healthy, your significant others are.
And almost every day I got to go home with Dave to his house with his twins from daycare. So I was able to do the check-in there myself. I had no idea how bad it was. I just knew that I was doing what I could do. But then I also had my own issues to deal with at home.
The off-topic question. I have I have twin nieces, and they developed their own language when they were younger.
Twin speak!
Huh?
Yeah, they definitely have that.
Yeah, they still do it a little bit. Like, I'll say something to them, and they'll lean in, and they're like mid-20s now. They'll lean in and like mumble. It sounds like mumbling to each other, and then you have one that's a talker and one that's not, and they'll one will actually answer for both of them. Or they'll say the same thing at the same time. Sometimes like it's wild.
They do that now, but when they were, we definitely had this little twin speak before they can really speak to us. We would see them babble at each other and start giggling, and we thought, okay, maybe they're just being playful. And then one would say something, the other one would turn around, pick something up, and bring it to her.
And eventually, you start making the connection. That particular babble means this.
Yeah. Oh my God. They know what they're saying to each other.
Yeah, because my son, when my ex and I first got together, she was living at home. Her sister was living at home. Their kids were 2 months apart, and they fully developed twin speak to the point where I could look under the refrigerator and recognize different phrases that they babbled. So I would go and try to cut them off to make sure, am I right? And see it do it. It's like, holy shit, I am sharing in their joy at them communicating with each other, and everybody else is fucking oblivious to this. This is awesome.
He's like, I'm a master code breaker.
Admittedly, I only knew a couple of things that they would babble, but it was an insight. Like, these kids are smarter than we give them credit.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Sarah used to tell me that, or has told me that her and her son's dad had that realization when their son was very young that, oh, Jesus, this kid's smarter than both of us put together. They're both brilliant, too. This kid's smarter than both of us
That's
put together.
Scary when your kids are that smart.
Yeah. And he is. He's too smart for our own good.
All right. So, on that note, thank you, Dave, for rescuing this podcast for this episode. Austin and I were sitting there going, what are we going to talk about? And I was like, I got an idea. Let me reach out to Dave. I think he might be able to do this. And thank you both for coming in after a little bit. Really appreciate it.
You both were awesome.
Yeah, I think that we actually went beyond the surface issue of dealing with a wife that was going through the HELP syndrome to really addressing the deeper issue of the shit that surrounds pregnancy, post-pregnancy and how it impacts everybody. I mean, it's a birth of a child in some ways is like a hand grenade in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's joyful, but man, does it cause a lot of damage and changes.
Oh yeah.
But I wouldn't change it for the world.
No, the whole thought of have a child so that you have a reason to stay together. No, don't do that. No,
It's gonna wind up.
you got to have some strong mental fortitude to make it through the younger years.
All right.
As a couple, even single parent.
Now, obviously, I'm not going to reschedule my own episode. That's the one promise I can give. When I schedule an episode for me, you can be sure that I'm not going to cancel it.
Again?
But this is for next week. Dave, I'd love you to join. Bo, I'd love you to join. Let's talk offline if we have to. I have a third person that will join who also got to witness the disassociations. It is literally the most terrifying issue that I have. I need a better understanding. And yeah, it's scary. I'm going to do it on the podcast. This could be something I could do offline, but I feel that it could be a disservice to someone else that might be able to relate. And I'd rather that if it help, it's going to help me one way or the other. But if we do it on the podcast, it could help someone else too.
Well, if nothing else, you might give me the courage to go after some stuff that I need to. I know I need to. So let's do this.
Kind of like I have to get that courage to work with you on something that I really want to. That you're.
You know what? I'm not going to push you. You got to do it yourself, man.
I know.
You notice I'm not pushing you.
I know, and I appreciate that. If you would push me, I'd feel guilty doing it, and then if it panned out, I'd just feel guilt the whole time, and it wouldn't work. So no.
And I'm not going to do that.
Thank you. I love you, brother.
Love you too.
This is my band of brothers right here, so to speak. My mental health warriors.
There you go.
All right.
I got a vinyl press. That's going to be a shirt. Mental health warrior.
I like it. Let's do it. And we can put it up on the website. We do have the, mimental.net/donations, which we also have T-shirts, stickers.
Go buy merch.
Go buy merch. The tote bags are actually pretty fantastic. They have a little key pouch too, or coin pouch, how you want to use it, which you never see on anything. Seriously, we bought one, opened it up, and went, holy shit, these things are awesome.
Nice.
Anyway, until next week, I'm E.
I'm Oz.
And we'll catch you guys later.